Welcome to Bold Voices, a production of the Community Foundation of Broward, where we explore Broward's biggest issues, get to know some of the people and organizations creating a bold impact in our community, and take a deeper dive into the world of local philanthropy with the experts at the Community Foundation of Broward. And now it's time to be bold.
Welcome to Bold Voices, a podcast production of the Community Foundation of Broward. Our focus is philanthropy and the impact it has on all of us in Broward County by supporting a wide range of nonprofits, and they cover every aspect of our lives here. And of course, our motto is Lead with Love. I'm your host, Ellen Jaffe. At the Community Foundation of Broward, we believe that art and culture are a key component of a healthy, evolving community. The arts enrich us emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And in education, students benefit from exposure to new ideas and forms of expression in art and culture. And of course, there's the economic impact, not just in tourism, but there's advertising, real estate values, and of course, local employment opportunities. In Broward County, the man who oversees it all is Phil Dunlap, Director of the Broward County Cultural Division. I am delighted to welcome you to Bold Voices, Phil.
Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure. You have a whole lot on your plate as the Director of the Cultural Division. Can you explain, for those who are not aware, what the full range is that the Broward Cultural Division covers and what's under your care?
Yeah, I always sort of explain it, that all things arts and culture in Broward County at some point come through my office. It's not quite as expansive because there's a lot of things that don't, but we're certainly the ones that people look to. At a practical level, we handle a lot of grant making to arts and culture organizations, around about $8 million directly to artists. We actually partner with the Community Foundation of Broward on our Artist Innovation Grant. We also support the vast majority of our arts and culture nonprofit organizations through supporting their programs, their operations, and we do some capital funding as well for cultural facilities. And then we just launched this fiscal year a brand new arts and cultural festival and special event sponsorship program, which allows us to actually provide support to for-profit arts and culture groups as well as nonprofit groups and municipalities. So broadening the idea of kind of who and what we're able to fund, with the idea that our cities and our neighborhoods and our communities are doing a lot of great cultural events that are really important to communities. And as a county, we want to invest and support and uplift those. So we have a brand new funding program to be able to support those. That's
wonderful. I didn't even realize that. I always think of the arts as being nonprofit. All the big ones that we've heard of and many of the smaller ones. And
it's I say common misconception, but that's kind of how our arts ecosystem has been structured. But, individuals, artist practitioners, they're not nonprofits. They are entrepreneurs, they're for-profits, right? And, what's really important is the activation and how it impacts a community. So through that program, we look at, what the percentage of local artists that are involved in the festival or event, and if there are vendors, is it mostly local vendors? So we're really looking at how the dollars get into communities and how it ripples through the community from an economic impact standpoint. But for-profit can be just as important as the nonprofit side.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of opportunity there. The other work, we don't just do grant making. Some of the other things that we do, we have a public art program that's almost 50 years old that generates dollars from county capital improvement projects. So not any construction in the county, but it's if the county builds a road or a library or a government building, we get money from those project budgets that we then use to commission everything from murals to terrazzo floors to sculptures to paintings and those kinds of things.
Right. Like we worked with Say Adams a couple of months ago on doing the love murals in Dania Beach and Plantation, and there are still other cities that will benefit from that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that people can see just driving around, and in a way they're participating in the arts by being exposed to it.
And then there's a lot of marketing and promotion of the arts that we do. We have a program called the Broward Arts Journalism Alliance, which hires local writers to cover arts events here in Broward. And We have a website called artscalendar.com that all of our grantees put their events and become sort of the clearinghouse of all things arts and culture happening in the county. We started the Ignite Broward Art and Light Festival, which will be in its fifth year here in 2026. So there's a lot of things that we do. It sort of covers the gamut.
And you send out emails. I receive them from you, Philip Dunlap.
They do, and people respond directly to me.
But they're great because you're providing the information about what's available so we know what we can see, where we can see it. What is your take on the importance of arts and culture? Why does it matter so much?
That's a really good question. And I think, here we're at kind of a turning point of sorts. And I say that just sort of culturally in Broward County. There's a desire for more access to arts and culture. We're growing as a community. I think we're really confronting being a community that's primarily a tourist destination and what that means for our own identity and who we are, right? Like we put so much emphasis on the beach and things, I'll say east of Interstate 95, and I get it, but at the same time, every coastal community in Florida has the beach and the ocean. So how are we distinguishing ourselves? And I think that's really through who we are as a cultural community and what we have to offer. Beyond that, I think we have a tendency to focus on the events themselves or the performances, the festivals, as who we are as an arts and culture community. But that's really just, one aspect, one measure. It's sort of the end result of everything underneath of it, sort of the infrastructure that we build, both infrastructure in a tangible, like physical sense, but also the cultural infrastructure that's just who we are as a community. And there was a post on LinkedIn that I think really encapsulates this. And for the viewing audience, I just pulled my phone up because I wanted to read this and actually kind of prepared to. And this is from a colleague in a different city, and I'm forgetting off the top of my head which city, but he wrote on LinkedIn, he said, we don't question the need to fund roads, water lines, or transit systems, but when it comes to funding arts and culture, we call it extra and we call it nice. But here's the truth. When a disaster hits or neighborhoods change, what holds a community together is not a policy memo. It's cultural memory. It's shared rituals. It's music. It's murals, dance, food, language, and legacy. And if that's not infrastructure, then what is? So the arts aren't decoration. They're civic scaffolding. They're how we transmit values, process change, and imagine better futures. And so we need to start treating culture for what it is, a public asset, a strategy, and a lifeline. I think that really encapsulates kind of where my head is and where I'm trying to take us as a community with regards to arts and culture.
That was so beautifully written. I got the chills while you were reading it. And one of the first things I thought of was how many times the arts community comes together when there is a disaster. And it's the arts community that puts on the events that are raising funds to help people in a crisis. And of course, that's not the only thing that it's important
for. No, but
for.
It's our community centers, it's our gathering points, and it's those sort of intangible things that help unite us as a community. It's not the concert we go to. That's an important piece of sharing a cultural experience with others.
Right.
And I think that's part of the power of arts and culture to bring us together. But if you don't have the sort of infrastructure underneath of it to support a community being able to come together like that in whatever form it is, then it's all surface level,
right.
And when the money goes away, the event goes away, right? And we got to, changing our idea of arts and culture to really look at it as civic scaffolding, as infrastructure, ultimately creates much more resilient and sustainable communities as a whole, which create and produce much more in that arts and cultural space just because they're stronger communities.
And it's interesting how you talk about it being a community. People come together, they have a shared experience. So that's our internal, in Broward County perception. What kind of perception are you trying to put forth to the rest of the world about Broward County beyond our beaches?
Well, I don't know that I'm necessarily thinking of beyond,
Okay.
Broward County. The world. I'm really focused on growing and developing who we are as a cultural community, right? I think we have an identity crisis, right? Okay. We say, nobody knows what Broward County is. Like, who are we? Our neighbors to the south have really coalesced around Miami as a brand and as a name. And there's been various efforts since I've even been here in 6 years to really say, who are we as a community, through changing our name or whatever it might be. And I think that identity crisis causes us to not really believe that we have a story and stories that are worth telling and worth uplifting. So we sort of lean on the low-hanging fruit, which is, our biggest tourism driver, the beach and those things, and for good reason. And I'm not trying to denigrate anything that happens over there. But what I'm saying is that there's a whole other element of who we are as a community that if we invest in and if we uplift through arts and culture, we could start to distinguish ourselves, I think, in a way that makes us unique. And that only builds on what we have already here and makes us a stronger community if we just believe that we have a story worth telling.
And we know we do. I mean, we've heard the stories, we've talked to people, and we've seen documentaries about our Haitian population, our Cuban population. We have such a mix of people. And I don't know if maybe that's part of the reason it's hard to come up with that one image of what we are.
But it doesn't have to be one image, I think, right? Like if you look at other communities, there are multiple images, multiple identities, or multiple elements that go into what that total identity is. And so I think we really have to start with looking at who we are. Okay. And where are those cultural pockets? Is there an equivalent to a little Haiti here? Like, can we identify, can we work with community leaders to put form and identity and celebrate that as when people come here to go to the beach, that they can come explore that, take a day off from being at the beach and go explore that part of who we are as a community, right? And then check out one of our local theaters or go to a local concert or go to one of our music venues and explore who we are off the east side.
And there are definitely different pockets. And we've talked about some of that before, how when we were working with, say, on the mural project, how each mural is unique to the community where it's placed. So Pompano Beach is different from Sunrise, is different from Miramar. And that's one of the things that we run into here at the Community Foundation of Broward. We put a priority, as you've mentioned, on partnering with arts organizations and supporting programs. And what we've run into is there's this perception that all of the good stuff is downtown. It's all East Broward. But there is a whole world of art and performance that has grown in West Broward. Can you let our audience know some of the gifts that are out there for them? The performance centers, the museums, there are festivals, et cetera, in West Broward.
Yeah, and I think that's just something we have to, as a community, grow to embrace. I mean, look at the city of Sunrise just created in their downtown a little art village on what they call the Sunset Strip. And it's not a place that I had really frequented. And then they created this arts village. I go down to Sunrise for the opening, and there's public art. They've got people creating murals. There's a cultural center. There's an outdoor performance venue. This is a new, great sort of asset, not only for the city of Sunrise, but for Broward County, that it's like, hey, this is a community, this is a city that's really embraced arts and culture as a way to distinguish themselves from other cities in Broward, or, create something that can really draw people in, but also is a great benefit for the community. Out in Miramar, there's great things that the city is doing through their Department of Cultural Affairs. They have a cultural center that has a concert series. They have a public art sculpture walk just behind their cultural center around this great pond or lake. They also have an amphitheater that's even further west that does everything from a Latino music festival to other great arts and cultural festivals and opportunities. There's a lot that happens out there. I think part of why it's hard to kind of discover is because here on the east side, east of 95 and kind of around that central corridor, it's where we have the densest sort of urban development. And the fact of the matter is most of the cultural venues and then the audiences and people are here in the central corridor and east of 95. But as we grow as a county, as we push further west, as our communities grow, my goal is to try and work with our cities to say, hey, who are we as a city? What are the stories, the neighborhoods, the communities, the narratives that we want to preserve and uplift? Because we know that in the face of development, a lot of these things get erased or get overshadowed or get lost. And so I really think it's incumbent on the cities to do a lot of the necessary and sort of hard work of saying, who are we and what should we be uplifting? Who are we, and then that gives me as the county something that I can then work with cities on supporting and figuring out how we strengthen that even further. And then as the county, we're kind of the connector. So then how do we connect all of these sort of cultural assets or these cultural pockets or activity centers, however you want to describe them, around the county, so we can start whether it's tourism, whether it's from an economic development angle, say, here's where our cultural assets are. Here's where we can really invest and we can really highlight and be proud of who we are as a community.
Yeah, we've had some of the cities in the western portion of Broward County have been very active. You mentioned Sunrise, Miramar, Pembroke Pines, also Coral Springs has a huge performing arts center and, their whole sports complex. It's another aspect of it, but it draws people. And then, more central in Davie, we've got the Bailey Hall at Broward College and at the Miniachi Theater at NSU.
But you know what we haven't talked about? And we've talked about performance venues, but what about cultural district?
Thank you.
What about a creative corridor in a city that through development incentives, through our land use plans, geographically lays out an area that a city wants to preserve that can attract the creative industries, that can make a place for artists, for arts organizations, and this is where I think, I want to see us go in a different direction or I'll say do better. That's not going to get me in trouble. But just as a community, it's like we've prioritized building a lot of spaces that I feel like our local arts community has trouble utilizing because we built cultural centers that are great and do great work, but they're 1,000-seat theater, or they're a 500-seat theater. Meanwhile, we have a small theater, company that is maxing out their 70-seat theater and needs to grow into a space that's not 500 or 1,000 seats because it can't make that jump.
Right.
And a lot of those venues may be out in the western part of the county, and an organization has to think about its audience. It's not easy for an organization just to pick up and go west because their audience may not necessarily come with them, right? So we've got to also prioritize building the right types of spaces, whether it's affordable artist studios or it's flexible use space that could be a theater performance one week in the right size of a black box theater, or it could be host a concert, or it could host a book reading or a wedding, in the evening, right? We need to focus on really looking at our cultural community and our creative community and say, what do you need in order to grow and be successful? And then build those pieces to help support that. So then maybe we can grow these organizations into better utilizing and more effectively utilizing the spaces that we have built. Yeah. Or we've kind of built a gap where I say we built a cultural infrastructure for an arts community that doesn't really exist here. So it prioritizes sort of like a churn and burn of bringing in touring groups, which is great. It provides something to go to. But insofar as creating really sustainable, resilient communities, it doesn't benefit our arts and culture community. And I think that's an important piece that's missing.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a gap between the artists, the entertainers, those who are creating the art, and the higher ups who make the decisions about where art is being presented, that if they can come together and share their viewpoints, can they reach out to you for guidance? How do they
I don't even know that I would say it's the higher ups as much as it's, we have the spaces, cultural spaces that we have. So it's not about the decision about what gets put there or not. It's about, ideally, you create a cultural infrastructure, a physical infrastructure that can both support touring and outside groups, but also be of great use to local groups. Because that's how they're going to grow. Right now we have those gaps, so it's hard for organizations to grow because we lack the spaces for them to grow in. So it's, on some level, it's the decision makers that decide what spaces get built.
Right.
But at the end of the day, once you build a performing arts center, you have a performing arts center. You got to utilize it. So if all we have here is small theater companies and we have 1,000-seat theater, then you sort of have a mismatch of who's here that could utilize it. And so you're almost forced to then bring in outside groups to utilize it.
So what do those small groups do, or individual artists who want to have a little artist community? Where do they go to get the support they need and the guidance? A lot of artists, they're focused on their art and, dealing with licensing and, real estate. Those things are not necessarily top of mind.
Yeah. And, this is, I think, where the advocacy piece comes into it, right? Like our lawmakers are the ones that control the purse strings, and they respond to what they hear from their constituents. So at some point, if the community, whether it's the artist community or it's the broader residents of Broward, feel that something is important, then they need to organize to get that message to those that make those decisions. And so, there's a great artist collective here called the Sobra Arts Collective, and that really started out of artist Dana Kleinman, and her and I, really talking about how do they get some movement on things like getting to build artist studios. And I say, you got to organize, you got to talk to your elected officials, but everybody has to be united in the same message. And so it's led to the creation of this artist collective, which now has 100 members.
Okay.
Now those 100 members could get together, and if there's something they're passionate about, they can go and speak to the legislature, the commissioners at the county and the cities, and communicate what they need. On my side, we're the staff side. So if the community says this is important, and the elected officials say we also believe this is important, and they carve out and provide the resources, then they come to me and they say, this is what the community has said they want, this is what they need, so here are the resources, come up with a plan to do it, right? So we need the community to advocate for what's important to them. And we, on the staff side, we respond to what the community says they need. So we're not out there just doing the things that we think should happen, but we're trying to meet the needs of what the community wants. So you got to have that advocacy piece, and it's difficult because you got to organize, you got to have a consistent message. It's a lot easier when there's a crisis,
right?
Like funding is being threatened, because then you rally around that really immediate need. But in those times that there isn't something necessarily threatening, advocacy is still important.
Yes.
Because you got to keep the issues in front of people. You got to continue the conversation. And then, you got to dream with your elected officials and tell them what you want, what you hope, and what you dream about being there, so that you can work together on making it happen.
Are there any kind of key words when you're speaking to elected officials to help them understand that there is value in creating these art communities? Because as we know, one of the first things that gets cut when it comes to budget time, if there's a tight budget, is the arts. So how do we get across to them that it's just as valid, just as important as many other things that they're funding, and that they need to come to you at the Broward Cultural Division and make a case for the artists and for the growth of the arts community?
Well, there's no one message. Legislators are humans just like you and me.
What would you say if you were speaking to someone and they didn't understand, maybe they just didn't have the exposure to the arts?
Actually, I would listen. I'd ask questions. Ask about what's important to them. If their message is healthy communities or economic development or community building, the arts tie into all those things, right? And so some of it's being knowledgeable about the topic to be able to respond to what you hear is important to a legislator. It's also not going to be important to everybody, right?
Right, sure.
So you got to be strategic and talk to the right audience. You can have the economic development or the economic impact discussion. You can talk about how many jobs are supported, and you can talk about how much money the arts community pumps into the local economy. And those conversations can be good, but at the same time, I think what legislators want to know are what's important to their communities. At the end of the day, it's their community that elected them to be there, and they are there to respond to what you want, right? Or what the community says it wants. So that's where that organizing.
Okay, so maybe someone who's interested in that goes out and does a petition, and they go door to door and say, hey, we're trying to put together an arts community. Are you on board with this? Does it matter to you? We want to present this to our leaders.
Yeah, I think it's all going to be circumstantial on the, as to how that happens. During COVID, I guess an example, we successfully got, I think, $2.5 or $3 million in CARES Act funding to support emergency grants to arts and culture organizations. Right. And part of how that worked was I got a group of arts leaders together, and I said, there's an opportunity, but we have to work together on this. I've got to come up with the process of how this would work, what amounts groups would get, what sort of how the program would operate. I said, if you guys want this to happen, you need to make the case to your county commissioners.
Okay.
And they went as a united front. They created a consistent messaging, and they met with elected officials. And those elected officials heard it. And because it was important and they believed it was necessary, they went to the county administration and said, here's what we want to do. And the county administrator came to me and she said, put together a program. And I'm like, I already have the program, right? Okay. So it can work that way where, our job on my side is to really try to set the vision and the direction of where we want to go and what are the initiatives that are going to get us there. And it's up to us to do that in conjunction with the community because, like I said, we are responding and creating things ultimately to be of service to our community. And then it's up to the community then to advocate for that to go to the decision makers, who are those legislators, to make the case. And then we kind of meet in the middle.
Right. So you've really provided the perfect template. It's get together, make a case, bring it to the commissioners, and make it important enough to them that they bring it to the county. And then the county says, hey, Phil, throw them some money.
Well, I suppose that's
a simplified version of reality. I get it.
We don't just throw money.
Okay. We're going to budget. We're going to grant. Yeah. I get you. You've been here almost 6 years as the head of the Broward Cultural Division. Are there certain programs or initiatives that you're particularly proud of?
I'm proud of all the work that we do. But, when I first came on board, we overhauled our grants program from the ground up. And I'm really proud of how we did that and the benefit that I hear from our arts community as far as how it's made the process easier, how it's made access to much needed capital and grants much easier. And that just makes the creative process and our enjoyment of it that much better. Certainly Ignite Broward, which is our Art and Light Festival, which will be celebrating 5 years in 2026. We started that in the middle of the pandemic out of a wild idea, and it's really grown to, I think, a really great community event that's free. Last year it was 10 days. It was in 3 cities. It was in Hollywood, Dania Beach, and Fort Lauderdale. And we're looking forward to 2026, and hopefully, there were 80,000 people over the 10 days that attended in 2025. So we want to continue to try and grow that. It's something unique. It's not necessarily unique in the world or these types of festivals, but in our area, this is something that helps distinguish us as Broward, and I'm really proud of that. Creating the Baja program, our Broward Arts Journalism Alliance, I'm really super proud of. And there's much more exciting stuff to come in the future. If
you go to broward.org/arts, your website really does have a lot of information. One of the things I see is the calls for artists and the grants that are available. So if you are an artist, performer, entertainer, creator, you can find that information.
Yeah, and one of the things that we announced at our last State of the Arts address, which I think is a really valuable resource that I'd like to really look at how we continue to leverage, is we created an arts data portal. And what that does is it visualizes and puts in dashboards our grants data, our public art data, our sponsorship data, economic impact data. And what it allows you to do is to go around and if you want to see where the venues are, where our arts groups are performing, presenting their work, if you want to see where our grants go, where the dollars go geographically, if you want to see where our public art is located, if you want to know about the economic impact of the arts. It may just be curiosity, or I get questions all the time, from whether it's commissioners, elected officials, or people about, oh, hey, how many grants are in this city? Or did this organization get a grant? Or, hey, how many organizations are funded west of 95? Or what's the total amount of grant making that in X fiscal year that the Cultural Division granted? So you can go on our dashboard and you can find all of that. Or people want to know the economic impact of the arts because they're going to go talk to a commissioner or a legislator and they want to be armed with some of those resources. So our data portal is a very centralized and I think good resource for all things arts and culture in that data. And we're going to be strengthening that and look for other ways to make it even stronger as a resource.
Excellent. And I'd say also sign up for Arts in Your Inbox so that you also can get personal emails from Phil Dunlap. It's just a great monthly email with things that are going on, where they're happening, in the full range, whatever your interests are, something is going to cover it. But thank you for that. And I'm just proud that the Community Foundation of Broward can partner with you and partner with other organizations. And that's one of the things that is a focus of what we do here, that people can direct their philanthropy to the arts if that's what they're interested in. So if you've considered becoming a community builder or, finding a way to give money in a way that will really make a difference, you can always speak to us at the Community Foundation of Broward. Our website, cfbroward.org, your website, broward.org/arts. Tons of information. Phil Dunlap, this has been enlightening. I thank you for all that you're doing to support our arts community in Broward.
Thanks for having me.
So from one expert to another, we've spoken with Phil Dunlap, director of the Broward County Cultural Division, and now it's Kirk's Corner with Kirk Englehardt, vice president of marketing and communications at the Community Foundation of Broward. It is always lovely to speak to you, Kirk.
Well, it's always great to be here, Ellen. And the arts are a personal issue that I absolutely love, and it's been part of my life since I was a child. And the fact that I could be here, working at the Community Foundation and working with partners like Phil and others in the arts community really is a thrill, because this is so important. I mean, the arts and culture are really the core to any thriving community. You want to have a robust, thriving community, has to have arts that are part of it. And that's live performances, murals, public art installations, music, art education, therapy, but it's even about looking at the cultural and historic aspects and the cultural assets that you have in your community. And a lot of it is about connecting people to these experiences, because there are people who are disconnected from these experiences. When you can cross that bridge and you can take the arts and put them in the hands of people who may not have access to that expression, that love, as the cultural assets and the historical experiences, it really makes a huge, huge difference for a community.
Yeah, I think about Sistrunk, the whole community around Sistrunk and the history there, and how it really was people coming together as a group, a community that completely revived the neighborhood. Arts is responsible for a lot of that. Wilton Manors, people came together, and not just performing the arts, but also creating spaces for creation. And it was interesting to hear Phil talk about how it's bringing the arts community themselves together as a strength to work with our leaders and politicians to get the funding to make this happen.
Absolutely. The funding can't just be philanthropic. It has to come from multiple places. And that the government dollars, those humanities dollars are really important as part of the equation. But I also want to point out the unifying factor of the arts. You alluded to that. And really, that's what it's all about. We say we lead with love. Think about how the arts play into that. When we want to give out grants, we're looking for projects that make a real impact on people in Broward. And that includes the arts projects and programs that we support. We want to impact youth, seniors, people with disabilities, LGBTQ individuals, people living in all parts of our community, from the highest home values to the lowest home values. Everybody should have access. And what you find out is that when people are going to a performance or are looking at beautiful art or engaging with it in some way, shape, or form, the differences that those people have fade away.
Yes.
Because it's about the art. It's a shared, unified experience where you're all loving something together. And that is what really makes the arts and the arts in Broward something special.
I agree completely, and that's why I encourage people. I keep saying it, sign up for the email letter that Phil sends out from the Arts Division so you keep up with everything that's happening. You can do that at broward.org/arts, and you can also see everything that's going on, find out when there are calls for artists to apply for grants, and so much more. And of course, always at cfbroward.org, at the Community Foundation of Broward, you can see the things that we're focusing on and where the grants are going and how important it is in bringing the community together.
Yeah, so two quick things. One is, if you are an arts organization and you are seeking grant dollars, you need some money to do something very, very special within the arts in Broward County, go to our website and check out the arts focus area, because you can apply for grants from the Community Foundation and we would welcome your proposals. The other thing is, if you're a philanthropist or you're somebody out there who really loves the arts and wants to invest and help with some of the money that you want to give back to the community, you want to support the arts, we are a great organization to partner with to make that happen, because we're connected to a lot of arts organizations, most of the arts organizations in our community. We know where the needs are, and we can certainly make sure that every dollar you give has a direct impact.
Well, thank you so much, Kirk Englehardt, Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the Community Foundation of Broward. And thanks again to Phil Dunlap, the Director of Broward Cultural Arts Division. And join us again for our next episode of Bold Voices with the Community Foundation of Broward.
Thank you for listening to Bold Voices. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and hope you'll be inspired to join us in creating a better Broward for all. If you'd like more information, visit us online at cfbroward.org, and remember to always be bold.